Alex, is what is Hey Bud?
What is Hey Bud? So Hey Bud is a hemp-powered skincare brand. We focus on a variety of different problems that people face with their skin challenges. We started off with acne as one of our predominantly strong bases, but over time we've kind of expanded that range. But essentially, we describe ourselves as a solution-led brand powered by hemp.
Perfect, perfect. And if you had an opportunity to walk into an elevator with perhaps one of the world's most prolific, most influential investors, actually, let's take the elevator out of the equation. You had an opportunity to send him a subject line, basically got to put your best foot forward. What do you put in that subject line? So it could be revenue, it could be number of products, size of the team, growth. What's the highlight reel so far as Hey Bud's growth is concerned?
Yeah, definitely. I would say Hey Bud has had an incredible trajectory over the past 4.5 years. In that span, what we have done is we've expanded to about 130 different countries, have over 200,000
Wow.
customers. Probably the part that I'm most excited about is the fact that we've got over 8,000 five-star reviews. So yeah, we really do focus on being a solution-led brand. So all of our formulations stem from what the customers in the market are asking for. But
Mhm.
I think what differentiates Hey Bud from all the other competitors is that we really work on providing results for people. Where does that come from? Well, it's ultimately led by the ingredient hemp seed oil. There's a lot of different benefits of it. We looked into
Mhm.
the studies of it and found those three key benefits that we focused on. It's anti-inflammatory, it balances oil production, and also repairs the skin barrier. So it's a very, very versatile ingredient as opposed to other ones where they're a little bit more specialized. And so what we do is we kind of offer the best of what nature has to offer, combined with clinically proven actives. Yeah, and then we work on kind of helping people rebuild confidence within themselves.
Awesome, mate. I don't know if that's quite 60 characters in an email subject line, but it's
A little bit
definitely
longer.
it's definitely piqued my interest. So, given all of this, I mean, I'm looking at you. You've got amazing skin, mate. I don't know if this. I mean, I'd like to deep dive a little bit into the origin story. Like, normally
Yeah.
when founders come up with a problem they want to solve, it's because they've experienced it themselves. Like, what was the origin story behind Hey Bud?
Yeah, absolutely. So I struggled with acne really badly throughout my teens and my 20s. So did
Hmm.
my co-founder Fidel. Back then, we tried everything on the market. So everything from the likes of your proactives or your benzoyl peroxides. But the commonality that we had, a lot of them was they were all really harsh in terms of the chemicals that they had. A lot of bleached towels, and the skin didn't really solve itself. So had a lot of irritated, dried skin, which then ended up producing more and more acne. Fidel's mum, one of the co-founders, she's a beauty therapist and has been for over 20 years. Now, back in 2017, she had heard about a skincare trend which was really blowing up in the US and Canada, which was hemp skincare. Back then in 2017, wasn't available in Australia whatsoever. So she had ordered it down from Los Angeles. And what she had found was within 3 weeks of using hemp seed oil, she found that her skin instantly felt really hydrated. Her inflammation was gone, and the irritation had also gone down as well. So we really got quite excited by this, and we started looking into the benefits of hemp. Then, when we looked into the studies, what we had found was there was a lot that was suggesting the correlation between the reduction of acne and hemp seed oil. So then, when we looked at the market in about 2018, clay masks were really quite popular. They were kind of exploding in Australia. But the problem with a lot of clay masks is what they do is they actually draw out impurities or oils from your face. What that does is it can leave your skin feeling very irritated, dried, or red. And we thought to ourselves, why not combine the hydrating elements of hemp and then combine that with bentonite and kaolin clay? So that's what we did. So we started off with about 500 units and we sold out pretty much instantly. So we started off with a bit of digital marketing, a lot of with influencer seeding, and very quickly people were getting results. You know, we like to call it kind of you see results within 10 minutes, but your face definitely feels better after straight away. But then after that, we usually see people getting quite drastic results after 3 or 4 weeks. So that's pretty much where the brand started. That was the beginning. And then ever since then, 4.5 years later, as I mentioned to you, over 200,000 customers, 130 different countries, but also about to have about 20 products. So a lot of product development in that time as well.
That's amazing. So 4.5 years into the journey, this is your first foray into entrepreneurship, as far as I understand. Prior to
Yeah.
this, you spent a little bit of time working at my former employer, EY. Quick question on that before we dive a little bit deeper into Hey Bud. the lessons that you learned, say, working in professional services or even from, say, higher education, I mean, how much of that was transferable or relevant in terms of growing Hey Bud?
There were definitely certain skill sets that I found to be quite favorable that I only now realize in hindsight. So I
Hmm.
think like I was particularly in the management consulting division, and one of the most interesting, one of the best kind of skill sets I learned from that was getting up to speed in the new market or a new project in a very short time frame. So
Yeah.
obviously in business, we have to learn projects or creatively problem solve very, very quickly in a short amount of time. EY taught me the skill set to how to kind of approach a problem and then get up to speed with all the relevant information, market data, whatnot, in such a short period of time to then be able to start analyze it and start providing solutions. So that definitely helped out a lot. I think also the fact that we were on new projects about every 8 to 12 weeks. So you had to adapt not only to completely different environments, but also the people in the team that you were working with as well. So you'd be dedicated team of, let's say, 3 to 4 with a whole bunch of different levels of seniority,
Hmm.
and everyone had different styles of working. Now being a business owner, and over the time of 4.5 years, we probably had about between 25 and 30 people come in and out of Hey Bud, understanding the different styles of working, and then understanding people's motivations, and then also the strengths and weaknesses as well of people. So EY definitely taught me a lot. And I think like an organization that big, the levels of systems and processes they have there is so clean cut. And then you go into starting your own business and everything is so scrappy. And then you kind of start building your way there as well.
Mm. Yeah, it's interesting. So it sounds like all that time spent putting together PowerPoint presentations wasn't wasted. It was actually teaching you how to get up to speed on a market and distill all that information. Love
That's
it,
right.
love it.
That's right.
Um, so it sounds like for a while there you were going the more conventional route, get an education, get a corporate job, climb the ladder. But you obviously took a hard turn to the right and started Hey Bud. Now, were there any earlier indications in your life, Alex, that you might pursue entrepreneurship, or was this something that ran in the family? Or
Yeah, fair bit actually. So my dad is an entrepreneur, my granddad is an entrepreneur. So it definitely has kind of run
wow.
down the lineage. But I never kind of honestly looked at that as, to be honest, my inspiration, because my dad tried to convince me otherwise. He
Hmm.
always found the entrepreneurship game quite difficult, and he wanted me to kind of push towards that partner path. For me, I definitely had those like cliche early inklings where my first example was, I remember when I was in year 8, and when you used to have a lot of those birthday parties, so my parents would buy a lot of like chocolates, lollies, and soft drinks as well. So we'd have slabs of Sprite, Coca-Cola, and all of those. I remember at one point realizing that, of course, with all birthday parties, there was so much left over. And then one day I'd look at the pantry and be like, I've still got slabs of Sprite and Coca-Cola sitting there. And then at my school, we only had those healthy soft drinks. And so I thought to myself, why not just take some of those cans to school? I partner up with a friend, and for about 2 weeks, I was selling each can for about $2. It was really great because I didn't even have to pay for it. And I was selling about 5 a day. And that lasted for about 2 weeks before a teacher pulled me inside and kind of shut down the whole operations. But then, like, it was interesting even to, get the small kind of learnings of, I'd start to have my repeat customers. So I'd have Hugh that would rock up, every lunchtime, and he'd always get a Coke. And so, like, understanding relationships and kind of building product market fit from that stage. And then later on, before the days of Tixel came on, which is kind of a
Hmm.
secondhand ticketing platform, I used to scalp tickets as well. So I know that's kind of frowned upon a little bit, but I remember my favorite memory was I was with my ex-girlfriend and we were going shopping, and of course I wasn't really having a great time and I was quite bored. And I had bought about 5 to 10 tickets from this particular music festival in the Mornington Peninsula. And then, yeah, I was just essentially saying, jumped on the Facebook groups and was selling about 2 to 3 at the time. And then
Hmm.
within the hour, I had sold each one at double the amount that I'd sold it for, and made about, I think, about $500 profit. And then that was kind of my first high risk, high reward. And then I started looking into when festivals would sell out, looking at previous lineups, and I did that for a couple of years. And the high that I got from that was always so exciting.
Love it, mate. Hope you're not the reason I paid $500 for a Stereo Sonic ticket back in the day, mate.
No, 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 maybe not.
Well, dovetailing back to Hey Bud. So as you said, you're in 130 countries now, over 200,000 customers, 8,000 five-star reviews. You're only 4.5 years into the journey. That is amazing traction. Now, when we look at the market today, e-commerce is a massive thing. I was in Bali recently, like every second person's working on an e-commerce play of some kind. It's never been easier to become an entrepreneur, to get your product out there, to distribute it around the world. But at the same time, that creates this paradox where there's so much more competition. So standing out becomes orders of magnitude more difficult. You did kind of briefly touch on the fact that, initially you worked with influencers on the marketing side. I know you had some joy on the distribution side with Priceline, but I'd love to hear a little bit more about Hey Bud managed to differentiate itself in what is, let's face it, a very saturated, cosmetics and skincare landscape.
Yeah, definitely. So I think at the very beginning, there were the good old days before Apple had updated its privacy laws. So in digital marketing, it's known as the pre-iOS 14.5 days, where, and I'll be full kind of open and transparent, it was a lot easier back then to scale. And so because we had a product that worked quite well, and then it was also quite visual, we were able to scale online predominantly for the first 2 years. Then what we did was when we were looking for distribution, we had found a partner that told us that we were too small to take on distribution. However, he wanted to actually invest into the business. Again, a lot of kind of luck factor because we weren't looking for that strategic investor, but we got that on board. He then really helped professionalize the business and also helped us go omni-channel. So he helped us everything from the Priceline pitch to kind of positioning of the brand, and then ultimately helping us get into about 400 doors. That process in itself probably took about a year to a year and a half before we actually got into the door from the inception of us wanting to actually get in there.
Mm-hmm.
Again, by luck and chance, no one saw kind of this offline online change in algorithm happening. And then so all of a sudden, pretty much in the space of 3 months, the online space got so much harder, cost of advertising went up, and we were already quite well positioned in starting to grow that offline retail piece. So in terms of kind of, again, going back to those early days, what really made Hey Bud stand out from the rest of the people was our focus is on, so we did a lot of post-purchase surveys and a lot of customer surveying. And what we had found pretty interestingly was about 45% of customers had bought Hey Bud because of the reviews. So then what we did was it was a really strong initiative from ourselves to build up the credibility and from a review perspective to our customers as much as possible. A lot of post-purchase surveys, emails, even types of giveaways and things like that in order to build that. We built a really strong review kind of credibility point of view on some of these independent platforms such as Trustpilot and Product Review. Those really made us stand out from the rest of the market when people kind of, these days, how many people really trust in a website's reviews versus having these independent platforms where,
Yeah.
to be honest, we started that from day one, and that it was maybe about a couple of reviews a week, but over the time now we've got over, I think close to 2,000 and 1,000 on both platforms with a rating of about 4.9. And having that and then using that as a form of advertising, it's something that a lot of brands don't really have or didn't invest to early days. Everyone just kind of went on the websites, but then all of a sudden the customer starts becoming quite numb towards to the reviews on the website. So I would say all those differentiations, as well as really focusing on the hemp angle and innovating in the formulas.
Yeah, now that's fascinating, and it's so true. Like I'm just reflecting upon my, Kindle book browsing. If I come across a book that looks interesting, but it only has, say, 17 reviews, I'm probably not going to invest, 8 hours and $20 to read it. But if I come across something that has, 4,529 reviews, 5-star or 4.5 plus, naturally I'm thinking, wow, this must be good. Even though it might not be,
Yeah,
I'm like, yep, no, it must be good. And I'll download it and I'll read it and all the rest of it. So I think the interesting point there is just around, user generated content, compelling your customers to leave reviews, but doing so on third party independent platforms, as opposed to just having a bunch of YouTube, videos on your website, which
yeah,
anyone can cobble together. You can get your cousins and your best friends to do that sort of
yeah,
stuff. Doesn't really mean
yeah,
much. And, you could get 20 or 30 reviews on Google reviews, but to get 8,000 plus from verified accounts, that is a very different story. So
definitely.
You did say in the first couple of years, I just love to understand that a little bit more. You did say it was much easier to scale because of the algorithm, and then things shifted and it made it much harder. So I imagine had you not moved into the retail space, then business fortunes might have been a lot more bleak at the moment. Like, how was it? Why was it easier to scale in the first 2 years versus today?
Yeah. So essentially, the tracking and the data that Facebook had available when you were advertising on that specific platform, both on Facebook and Instagram, was a lot more dialed in than it is now. So
Mhm.
essentially, there were sayings that Facebook would know you better than your partner would. Every single click, they would dial it down exactly to what type of interest, what color, what are you looking at, and the ads that they were serving was so specific to the customer, and so therefore the likelihood of purchasing was so much higher. What happened was Apple came in and they had this new vision about protecting their privacy. And so what they did was they actually cut off anyone that had an iOS device, which a lot of people do. They actually had cut off about 5 to 7 data points that was previously available within the Facebook platform. So essentially, what that meant was all of a sudden targeting became much more broad. It was less specific. So it kind of reverted back to the old days where you kind of would see a billboard and you're kind of just throwing things at the wall and hoping
Right.
that someone would be interested in your creative or your idea, versus before it was so much easier where if it was remotely similar to the person, it would just be so dialed in and targeted.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So your cost per click went up significantly and the cost to acquire a customer went up, and therefore with an
Yeah.
average sort of product price of what, 50 to $100
Yeah.
doesn't really pay off when you're paying $50 to acquire a customer, or even more than that. Okay.
Yeah.
That makes
Definitely.
perfect sense. So with respect to moving into the online space, you mentioned you had an advisor slash investor who got on board, took about a year and a half to get into 400 plus Priceline stores. One question I have with you on that is, reflecting upon perhaps the health supplement world or even the fitness supplement world, there's a lot of niche brands that you can only find, say, either online or in specialty, fitness supplement stores. And then you have these brands that have kind of made their way into, say, Chemist Warehouse or Coles or Woolies. And sometimes that can actually reflect poorly on a brand. It doesn't mean that the brands or these products aren't as good, but for whatever reason, in the mind of the consumer, sometimes they're like, oh, it's a Chemist Warehouse brand now. It's not as cool, and so on and so forth. Like, how have you guys gone about navigating that sort of shift into your price line and the retail space without losing the cool factor?
Yeah, definitely. It's a great question. I think the first part when we were considering omni-channel was about distribution, but then secondly was about where does our customer actually shop. I think the way that we positioned our brand ended up being quite different to the customers that we were actually attracting. So one interesting part is when people look at our branding and our website, they typically think we're much more skewed towards Gen Z and younger. However, when we looked at the data, we actually found that about 50% of our customers were over the age of 35. And then when
Mhm.
we dug a little bit deeper into that, we found that there was a lot of mums that were actually buying our brands, particularly for their teenage son or daughter. But then after that, a lot of them were experiencing their own hormonal acne as well. And so they would buy it for their daughters or sons, and then they would start using it for them themselves. Then when we saw them, when we were starting to build our Facebook, we have a Facebook VIP community, has about 16,000 members. It's an incredible spot to build a community. A lot of people posting tips and tricks and things like that. When we were asking them where would they like to see Hey Bud stocked, it was the likes of your Priceline, your Chemist Warehouse, and your groceries as well. And so the interesting part as well is you might have a vision of where you think you want to take the brand, and potentially earlier days it was more towards that mecca because there was a cooler factor to it.
Mhm.
But then you find kind of later on is like where more so are your customers shopping, and then create a tailored approach to that. And so that's essentially what we did. Was then when we spoke to Priceline and they shared their demographics, it was actually very similar, if not pretty much the same as what we were having at the time. And then when we actually went into store, we've had pretty incredible results. We've only been there for about a year and a half, but in that space of the year and a half, so we're in the naturals bay, in the naturals area in Priceline. Our brand has actually been the fastest natural growing skincare brand within the naturals. And I believe a lot of that has come down to the right positioning, the product market fit, but also the right customer demographic, Whereas potentially if you look at the likes of your Sephora's and your Meccas, maybe would have not been as right of a fit.
Yeah, yeah. And with respect to Priceline, I'm just thinking about this from the perspective of the pharmacies, from the perspective of Priceline and so on. You only have so much shelf space, right? And
Yeah.
you only have so much space for cosmetics, for skincare. You no doubt have tens, if not hundreds of other brands pitching, knocking on their doors, trying to get in there. Like, what's the conversation you have with them? Like, what boxes are they looking for you to tick in order to say, okay, hey, bud, the door's open to you?
Yeah. It's very different to where it first started with the pitch to actually get in there versus where we are now. So when we first started in there, obviously you're a non-proven brand, but we did have really strong sales when it came to the online aspect of things. So there, showing the types of the sales that we were having on the online aspect of things, the reviews, all of that, Priceline kind of looked at that and goes, okay, well, we can take definitely a piece of that. And especially that's probably one of the biggest differentiators is in Priceline and a lot of these pharmacy chains, they have a lot of these kind of like old school traditional legacy brands, and a lot of them don't actually have a strong online platform or reputation there. That's one of the key differentiators that really allows HeyBud to compete is we have a really strong online base that is actually both shared not only in the online but also in the offline base as well. So in our first year, we could run ads, drive our community to go into stores and whatnot, which actually allowed us to grow extremely rapidly there. Now we're in a position where we are growing extremely fast within the channel. We have access to data that actually shows how every single brand within pharmacy is doing in terms of revenue and perspective per SKU or per item.
Mm.
And we can very easily show a story of our growth compared to some of our competitors. And given that we are a lot higher than some of the other ones, it actually makes it quite an easy story to say, hey, here's how much we've grown in the past 12 months. Had we have had an extra quarter or third more of a shelf, this would even result in even stronger results compared to some of your other brands that we're actually seeing a decline by 20 or 30%, whereas HeyBud might be growing by 100%.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So having that omni-channel approach definitely made you stand out compared to many of the legacy brands on the shelves at various pharmacies. So with one more question on the marketing side, especially during the early days, because I think it'll be useful to entrepreneurs and even larger brands who are tuned into Future Squared. But nowadays it's become pretty popular for brands to engage, say, micro influencers. So we're talking 10,000 to up maybe 100,000 followers on Instagram and other platforms. Given your sort of not dependency, but your focus on retail as well as ads in the early days, I know you did a bit with influencers. Like, how important was that to the business at the start, and how important is it today?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think right from the difficult part about the influencer piece is about the attribution, which we still haven't figured out, being
Mm.
transparent with you. But what we did right from day one was we have always seeded out about 30 to 40 products a week with influencers, but we focus on that nano influencer scale. So anyone that has between, let's say, 2 to 5,000 followers,
Right.
we would give them a free product, just pay shipping and the cost of goods. And essentially we would create awareness for that. Now we have done that strategy the entire time for the past 4.5 years. I have to believe that that played a pretty big part in making our ROAS a lot more efficient over time. Again, it's not something that's necessarily trackable, or we haven't really been able to figure that part out. We could do a holdout test and whatnot. But now that we've got much more a significant scale, we have to start to look again, comes back to that distribution and awareness piece. We're going to be in, 1,000 stores not that soon, sorry. And then we have to start looking into some of those larger macro influencer pieces to really start figuring out again who does work from our brand perspective, but also understanding which types of influencers actually have genuine influence and then also share the same audience that actually would translate to further sales within this
Right.
retail market as well. So I would 100% anyone that's in the CPG space, I would recommend the nano influencer piece, giving out the product to try, not only from the awareness piece, but also especially from a content piece in order to generate content for ads. That also was a really big strategy where people would post a review, you would take that, pop it onto ads, and that would start to build its own cycle.
Yeah. And just on that, I mean, on the attribution side, do you guys not provide influencers, say, with a unique coupon code that they can share with their audience. Does that not make it easier to really get a grip on attribution?
Yeah, so we did do that at the beginning. We found that just kind of like looking into the market and talking to a lot of customers over time, there was a big kind of shift against influencers as well. And I think
Mm,
that people want authenticity as much as possible. And as soon as you see someone go, I've tried this hemp clay mask, it's really great, use Steph 15 for a discount
yeah.
code, that immediately takes away the authenticity piece for it. Whereas the theory, which again, we haven't completely proven it, but we like to feel that if someone just talks about a product and they don't mention any sale or go to the website or any discount code, there is a more of a chance of it being a little bit more authentic. Or yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I definitely buy into that. I guess it's a catch 22 because then you're not able to actually track the impact of doing that. So it is, yeah, it's basically a
I
catch
agree.
22.
No, I agree. And like I said, we didn't find that the discounts, it was quite low, but we found that, like, I guess the closest test we were able to find was there were times where we were only doing, let's say, 10 sends out a week versus 50. Pretty significant difference in terms of the awareness created. And every time that we saw that we hit that 50 mark, ROAS and just organic sales were just much higher overall than when we were sending out
Mm.
less.
Yeah, no, it sounds like a pretty good indicator. So moving on from marketing and distribution, as someone who's running a CPG brand, Alex, I can't help but think of something that Elon Musk said repeatedly on Joe Rogan's podcast, and I've got a quote here from Mr. Musk, where he basically says many movies exist about a lone inventor in a garage having a eureka moment, but almost none about manufacturing. So it's underappreciated by the public. Compared to the insane pain of reaching high volume, positive margin production, prototypes are a piece of cake. So, as someone who's lived and breathed CPG and manufacturing for the past 4.5 years, I imagine it's been a wild journey of ups and downs and challenges and banging your head against the wall. Talk to me about how you guys have gone about managing the end-to-end, manufacturing of Hey Bud's products.
Yeah, I completely agree with Elon Musk for sure. And it's definitely one of those things that people aren't really aware of until you kind of get into it. It honestly is a constant work in progress. It has been such an evolution from the early days where you kind of have no idea what's going on. And essentially, you rely so much more on the contract manufacturer to lead the ideas and the processes. Then over time, I think, unfortunately, unless you have someone with a lot of experience or that's quite skilled in that area, you essentially just have to learn by failing so many times over and over again. And then every time a particular hard learning happens, we just kind of take that and start to implement that into the process. So over the past couple of years, we have really kind of dialed it in. But I think probably one of the biggest misconceptions is about speed to market and how fast you can get a product out. There are so many steps along the way. So essentially, I'll give you kind of a brief overview. Is we start off with the research phase where we work with research platforms, market data, global data, national data, then work with customer surveys, go one-on-one with customers as well, take all of that data over a couple of months' time to then dial in what we think some of the products should be. Then we go into a stage with a formulator. The formulator starts to create the mock-up of what they think suits the product that we're trying to create, also for the key demographic and key concern. Then from there, you'll go back and forth and might create, let's say, 5 to 10 different versions of this product. Then you'll go there and then you'll start. What we do is we do customer testing. So we'll send out to about 50 to 100 customers and we'll do blind testing across 3 different types of products, including ours and some of the other best market samples. Then there you have a lot of the changes to make from there. But the complications really start to happen when you go to the bulk scaling up contract manufacturing side of things. So although you have a signed off sample formula, there are so many, I guess, unexpected events that occur when you go from, let's say, one product all the way to we produce around, each one might be about 10,000 units.
Mhm.
And there are just unknown complications that we will be the first to say that we are not experts when it comes to necessarily the contract manufacturing side of things. We rely on experts, but sometimes, for example, we would be we've agreed upon this purple color, and then all of a sudden it just goes a completely different color, and no one can figure out because we followed the formula, we followed the method, and that just might potentially happen. Or we had another scenario happen where the formula was really great, everything sat well, and then all of a sudden we found that 2 months later the formula, it was like a solid formula, and it started actually melting within the vessel, the cream did. And we just had absolutely no idea, because it turns out that it took like a couple of weeks or months for that to actually happen. And then we didn't realize at the time that all the samples that we were given were in glass jars, but then turns out that this particular formula reacted with plastics. And then like these are things that just are
Yeah.
completely unforeseen. And I don't know if there's a way of like knowing about them beforehand, because you're talking to your advisors and your formulators and your contract manufacturers, but even they're unaware of these things as well. So I think, I don't know, my biggest piece of advice is try do a smaller scale up versions for a lot of these, and also give yourself so much more time than you think, because whenever we've given ourselves deadlines of, let's say, 12 months, it always ends up being an extra 3 to 4 months after that, because of there is now an expectations that things will probably go wrong. And as long as you have the time for it, then you can fix it.
Yeah. Yeah. And with respect to that product that melted, was this after it had gone to market and sat on shelves, or right?
Yeah, yeah, it
And did
did.
you have to
Yeah.
like recall the product, or how did you navigate those murky waters?
Yeah, so the lucky part was it actually sat within our warehouse. So what we did was we actually reformulated it and actually did a different type of formulation before we then sent it off.
Mm.
And yeah, then we just had to get rid of that stock. So
Yeah. Okay. And with respect to manufacturing, I guess tangential to that is legislation. And in this space of skincare, I imagine you have to deal with the Therapeutic Goods Administration.
yeah, yeah.
Uh, Talk to me about jumping through all of those hoops, and how difficult it has been to take products to market that tick all the right boxes.
Yeah, it hasn't actually been too bad, to be honest. I think what we've done pretty earlier on is we've always worked with a TJ consultant. So every time we come out with a product to market, when we go through the labeling process of what the product does, you always take it through a TJ consultant and you give them kind of a first draft. And they'll come back with suggestions or ideas of what you need to change. When it comes to therapeutics, the biggest aspect is differentiating from claims to kind of suggested benefits.
Mhm.
So on packaging, you can always say may assist with, let's say, reducing acne, but you just can't say necessarily reducing acne with that. So that's probably one of the biggest part is that there's a bigger level of softness when it comes to making sure some of the benefits that you have on there and just not stating things as an absolute claim. At the same time, if you have clinically proven actives, you can talk about those studies, but not necessarily as the entire product.
Right. And in
So,
order to,
yeah,
sorry, go on.
no, that's it.
Yeah,
I
no.
was just
So in
like,
order to just make those claims, you obviously need to then pay to get your own double-blind clinical studies done, which in and of itself will be a very expensive exercise. So
correct.
you can
Yeah.
just circumvent that whole process by not explicitly making those claims on your packaging and in your marketing.
Yeah. And you can make it, you can just, they call it marketing fluff. It's just, there's a way
Mhm.
of being able to say it that's kind of like a little bit more in this gray area. But as long as you don't have a direct claim, then it's usually pretty good.
Yep, perfect. And with respect to, say, the changing legislation and speculated changes around, say, cannabis products, CBD oils, hemp, and so on, does that affect your business? And would changes in the legislation around these things create space for new products to market in terms of what Hey Bud does?
Yeah, absolutely. This is definitely an area that we've been excited for quite a while. Earlier days, there was definitely more talk of CBD being legalized recreationally, much more earlier. That I know got pushed back a fair bit because of COVID. And so obviously they're focusing on the vaccines there. I think that's an absolute massive opportunity when we talk about cannabis or CBD. The stigma has definitely gone, and we've seen that in the market that people are much more liberal, especially with the likes of Canada and the US making it much more recreationally available.
Mhm.
So I do believe that when that opportunity does finally come to Australia, and no one can tell me when exactly that is, I don't think anyone knows. I don't think
Yeah.
the TGA even knows. I believe that will be a huge, huge opportunity, especially for us, given that we are hemp skincare, which comes from the cannabis plant.
Mm.
But also, we are starting to formulate of CBD formulas in the US to be prepared for the moment when that does actually come through.
Right. And in the interim, would you just look to play in that space in the US? So, because you did mention you're in, 130 odd countries. So, do you have similar deals in the US, say, with pharmacies over there, or is it purely online at this stage?
Not yet. So international, yeah, we do just focus on online advertising. I think what we want to do, so kind of our plan is really to focus on building out that Australian landscape in offline retail for the next 12 months. Really start to build that because we are super early. We've only been there for a year and a half and we've had a lot of success, but we really need to grow on that more. We're also in New Zealand retail as well, which is kind of like another Australian state. But then after that, what we are the aim is build more and more the audience and customer base that we currently have in some of those big five countries, so US, Canada, UK, and New Zealand, and
Hmm.
then eventually once we have a big enough space here in Australia to then go and look at the likes of Boots or CVS, Walmart,
Hmm.
and go there.
Perfect, perfect. So you did say that you've had about 30 or so people come in and out of Hey Bud over the past 4.5 years. How
Yeah,
big's the team at the moment, roughly?
seven of us,
Beautiful,
seven
beautiful.
plus contractors. Yeah.
Awesome. So, which again, given all the success you've had, that's still a very sort of lean team compared to, say, some of your competitors who might be big bloated organizations where regardless of how the company is performing, you've got a massive payroll to service, which I think is definitely a competitive advantage to maintain that lean, nimble approach to building a business. But it can be difficult to hire great talent because, we touched on working at EY, both of us previously, which oftentimes the best talent, they graduate, they go off to work at, management consulting firms, investment banks, law firms, big tech companies. They're oftentimes, not chasing a small startup with, 5 to 10 employees. So how have you gone about trying to find the best people for the job in terms of selling the story, positioning, and incentivizing people to join you as opposed to join some other company that's offering them equity in this fast growing multi 9 figure company?
Mm, yeah, I've got a couple thoughts about it. I think first of all, because even just recently we went through a bit of a hiring spree. And what I find from a lot of interviews is that there actually is a lot of good talent that actually are looking for a bit of a startup experience, probably more so of people that are a little bit on the younger end. So we haven't still hired necessarily people with 20 plus experience, 20 years plus experience, but we're finding some really high level talent of people that are, let's say, 35 and below that are interested in that startup life. I think with the TikTokification and social media of everything opening up, I think people are starting to see more behind the scenes of how these startups actually look like. What does the culture look like? For example, on our TikTok, we post a lot of behind the scenes of what's going on in the office. And then on top of that, what we also try focus on. So we see ourselves as disruptors, and that's how we can kind of compete with the likes of the L'Oreals and the bigger guys in the space.
Hmm.
And by doing that and posting, let's say the PR or some sort of like news media article that comes out about a specific activation, by creating that awareness there, that in itself becomes, I would say, a bit of a recruitment tool.
Yeah.
And so a lot of the times when I'm hiring, what I've found is that people already have actually known about us, and they are quite excited by the fact of doing something fun, exciting, and also purpose driven as well, rather than kind of just being in your typical corporate desk. They're smart people, they're ambitious, but they're sick of red tape, they're sick of having five managers, and they're keen to try do something a little bit different. So I've actually seen probably more of a shift in the past 12 months in that sort of sense than I did, let's say, 3 years ago, where
Hmm.
startups were seen more of a risk back then.
No, that's encouraging to hear. And you have two co-founders, right? So
Yeah,
essentially, to me, it's a bit reminiscent of, say, Airbnb with Chesky,
yeah.
Gabriel, and the other guy whose name is escaping me
The
right
other
now.
guy
And the other
doesn't
guy.
think him right now. He's got a stab.
So, I mean, what do you three all play different roles in the organization? And I guess a subsequent question to that is, from what I know, you guys are friends. So, oftentimes they say don't go into business with friends or family, but you've kind of broken that cardinal rule. So, talk to me about the role sort of segmentation and what it's like building a business with two of your mates.
Definitely. One of my favorite questions because I love my co-founders, so it works well. In terms of segmentation, so I focus on the product development and paid media side of things. Then we've got Fidel, who focuses on commercial and offline retail. And then we've got Ollie, who focuses on the operation side of things. Where we've been super lucky, and the reason why we actually came into business in the first time. So I've known Fidel since year six. So I've known him for about 15, 16 years. And then Ollie, I played tennis with him. And then we all actually came together and did the same course at university. The commonality between all of us was the fact that we were just all ambitious and wanted to start our own thing. I think where we got extremely lucky was the fact that we didn't realize that all of us had actually quite different skill sets to each other. So we all came to business together, and what we found was over the past 4.5 years, naturally you kind of move to different parts of the business, and every single, one of my weaknesses will be one of Fidel's strengths, and then one of my strengths will be one of Ollie's weaknesses, and it just kind of all comes together and it allows us to hit all the different areas. That is something that I would definitely keep in mind for future businesses and whatnot, but definitely got super lucky with that this time.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. And with respect to say restructuring, because you did say, you've had people come in and out, you've had to learn about different people and different working styles, different communication styles. No doubt you've had to let go of people. Like, what have you learned about hiring in the past 4.5 years? And, what are some of the hard lessons you had to learn along the way?
Yeah, I think earlier days, hiring was seen as something to get through quite fast. And we painfully learned that lesson quite quick, where, we might have had a couple of false starts, or people fell out or took another job. And then because of that, there was an urgency bias to try and get people as fast as possible. But then what you do is you compromise on the quality. Probably the biggest thing that's changed for us in terms of hiring over the past 4 years is the fact that we over index in the amount of effort that we do at the very beginning. So for us, for example, we've got a 5-stage round process that you meet all 3 co-founders, also one of our executive team members as well. And then on top of that, we do psychometric testing, as well as we get the person to do a practical task for the specific role to then present to us in person as well. So there are so many different markers along the way that kind of allow us to gauge what type of person or what type of performer they'll be. And what we found is we probably introduced that in the past 12 months. And the people that have gone through that have just come out to be such higher performers than the previous ones, where it used to be like a 1-2 round interview. Do they feel good? Yep, great. They're part of the culture. And then that was kind of it. So that's definitely been probably one of the biggest aspects of there.
Yeah, yeah, and I can definitely relate to just hiring someone based on one interview and gut feel and maybe one or two
Mm,
reference checks and oh yeah, they'll do. And yes, they did not do, but that's painful lessons you learn by doing. That sounds like a pretty intense process. Like I remember going for a job in investment banking at Macquarie Bank like 11, 12 years ago now. And that was a 3-stage process, including psychometric testing, which at the
yeah.
time seemed like a lot, whereas you guys have five stages, was it? Yeah,
Yeah.
that's brutal. Do you think that perhaps in some cases people might look at that and say, it's too much? And I guess your answer would be probably not the people you want.
Exactly. Exactly. I think the people that we're looking for are also people that are really passionate about what we're doing. It's not
Right.
so the way that I describe it to people is, if you're just looking for a 9 to 5 job and you clock in and clock out, this is not the place for you. Now, I'm not saying that from like a work-life balance perspective that we work crazy hours, because we don't
Mm,
necessarily do that. But
yep.
it's just more so the fact of like, you're actually coming here because you want something more out of yourself in your life. And so the way that I describe it is like, Hey Bud's a really great personal development engine for yourself. And the more you put in is the more that you get out. And when I say these kind of things to the people in the interviews, the ones that really resonate with that are the ones that kind of are really hungry. They're also probably really passionate about skincare, and they don't mind kind of doing all of those stages.
Yeah, I think it's like Richard Branson famously said, hire people who are mission driven, give them the resources they need to succeed and get the hell out of the way. But unless they're
100%.
mission driven, unless they buy in, unless they share your values, it's going to be an uphill slog. So you
Yeah.
did say work-life balance, Alex. And when I look at you, I don't see eye bags under your eyes, although that could be the Hey Bud skincare talking. I don't know. Um, like talk to me about how you guys try and maintain that balance, or if you try and maintain that balance, given you're essentially a fast growing business that has audacious goals to essentially go global.
Yeah, definitely. I think classically, as with a lot of startups, the first couple of years are definitely you're putting in much more in the grind to
Yeah.
actually make the business somewhat viable. I think what I've learned over time is the classic cliche that business is a marathon and not a sprint. And I love Naval's quote is like, treat business like as if you're a lion. A lion, when he's hunting, he's going 110%, but then other times he's sleeping. And I find that the same thing happens for us as well. It's like, if you're going at 110% the whole time, I know I personally have found myself that I just burned out at a certain point,
Yeah.
and so the other guys and team members as well. So we always try build in a level of sustainability, but then when the moments come up where it's a big range review or you're pitching for something, those particular moments you might be putting in some of those harder hours there. I think just by also having a fun culture really does kind of, if you enjoy coming into work more and you kind of build some sort of friendships with the people within your workspace as well, it's kind of the place where you don't actually mind spending a lot of time as well, that I found. So we really put a lot of effort into like, whether we just went to the footy last week, or we'll go bowling or lawn bowls, or, we'll go out for dinners and drinks and things like that. And by investing into those things, when people have a lot of fun with each other, you then don't mind spending a couple of extra hours kind of doing the things as well. And then on top of that is just the classic kind of health and fitness stuff. So I love going to the gym. I love running. I love reading. I'm a bit of a multifaceted person. So for me, work is a part of my life and it's definitely a huge part of it, but I definitely need other aspects to stimulate me as well. And as long as I've kind of got those things over a certain period of time, then that then allows me to bring my best version to work, which everyone has their own version of that as well.
Yeah, absolutely, mate. And just on books, what are you reading at the moment?
What am I reading at the
Or do
moment?
you have a book recommendation for the audience?
I just finished Walter Isaacson, Elon Musk's biography.
Yeah,
That was awesome.
fantastic. Yeah.
That was really great. Definitely interested to see kind of like behind the hood of what it takes to be such a high performer. I think you've got the incredible element of like how much he achieves, but then like learning how much of a difficult person he is to kind of the standards and
Yeah.
the shrinking of the deadlines to be like completely unrealistic, but then getting people to push past, more than they ever thought was possible. I thought was really cool as a lesson from him to take away. I also just read from a business perspective, Patrick Bet-David's The Enemy, something about the enemy. It's his latest book. It's like a red cover. That was really incredible as well. It all focuses about a mixture of emotion and logic and how to create like the perfect business plan to kind of succeed in your business.
Yep.
So that was a really good one. And I've got, there's one, I forgot the name of a book. It's something called The CEO. It's Naval's coach, Matt Mockery. Probably one of the best books that I read. And I probably read that book 2 to 3 times a year. So if you search up Matt Mockery and his
Yep.
book, it's The CEO something.
Okay.
Incredible.
I'll dig that one up and add it to the show notes for our listeners. And it was fascinating reading about Elon and just seeing how sadistic he is in many ways when it comes to
Yeah.
his own enjoyment of life. It's like whenever things are going, swimmingly, he just
Yeah.
finds a way to just screw everything up. He's
More
like, okay,
chaos.
I guess I'll
Yeah.
just go and buy Twitter and pour $45 billion into that.
Yeah.
Wild.
Yeah.
Awesome, man. Well, this has been a fascinating conversation. Really enjoyed catching up with you today, Alex, and learning all about Hey Bud. I want to congratulate you on your success thus far and wish you all the best with Hey Bud going forward. I'm sure it's going to be a wild journey, no doubt. So thanks again. And if the audience wants to learn more about Hey Bud Skincare, pick up some product, of course, they can do so at heybudskincare.com. Priceline stores. Is there anything else you want to point our listeners to before we wrap up, Alex?
I'd love to give your listeners a bit of a discount code. So I'll do a Future Squared 15 for all of your listeners to try out the products.
Perfect. Well, Future Squared 15 is the discount code. Of course, I don't know. I'm in two minds now. Should I promote that on Instagram? Because it's going to look disingenuous if I do, mate, based on what you told me.
Exactly.
Awesome, mate. Well, thanks again, Alex, for your time and all the best.
Thanks, Stevie. Appreciate it.